As we continue our series on summer road trip, let me see if you remember this refrain, if you've ever had driving vacations. Dad, are we there yet? Dad, Mom, are we there yet? That was a familiar refrain. Our family took driving vacations, so much so that I said when I got grown I would never take my kids on a driving vacation. They talked me into it once. I'll tell you about that. That's a whole nother sermon. But today I wanted to ask Craig and Eli for us to just do a little round table on talking about fatherhood. We recognize that some of us come from intact families, some of us come from divorced families, as I did. But that was a passage in Psalm 27:10. It's printed there in your bulletin. Psalm 27:10 says, "Even if my mother and father leave me, the Lord will take me in." Even if my father and mother leave me, the Lord will take me in. They may leave me by death, they may leave me by decision, but the Lord will take me in. Some of us have pleasant memories, some of us have painful memories. And so this is not just about fatherhood exclusively. It's from a dad's perspective. But if you're a single mom, if you are, no matter what level of parenting you're at, we trust this will be beneficial. And if you have not memorized that verse, this one is one for you to cling to. Even if my mother and father leave me by death or decision, the Lord will take me in. So let's just enjoy a conversation. This will take about an hour and a half.
I feel like we're on vacation, sitting in the back seat.
Yeah,
I'm riding the hump.
And you riding the hump. That's right. You're just the most humble of us.
No, this is a seniority thing.
You like Mikey.
Mikey.
Little Mikey, yeah.
Okay. Brett, sorry about that.
That's all right. It's all right. I'm on the microphone after the offering. I feel like I got the keys to the car, and they all jumped in the car with me. So I'm going to try to keep this on the rails here. Let's start with this. Can you tell us a funny story about you as a father, about how your father parented you that would start us off well, Rufus?
Yeah, that's several funny stories. They're funny now. They weren't funny then. In 1977, my stepdad gave me a new car to go off to college in, the first in my family to go to college. And my best friend, Ralph West, was there with me. He looked at me and said, "Now, don't drive downtown because you're inexperienced. Downtown in Houston were all one-way streets. Don't drive downtown. I'll teach you how to do that later on." And so we were enjoying driving around that few days. And then Ralph said, "Let's go and support Zachary Maxey." He was our good friend. He was the valedictorian of his class and giving the speech. And I said, "Great, we'll go support him." "Where is he speaking? Where's their graduation?" He said, "It's the Sam Houston Coliseum." I said, "Wes, that's downtown." I said, "My dad said I couldn't drive downtown." He said, "You couldn't drive downtown." He didn't say I couldn't drive downtown. I said, "Good point." So we drove to support our friend. And after it was over, we were walking back to the car. I said, "Ralph, where are the keys?" He said, "Well, I don't have the keys. You have the keys." I said, "Well, you drove. You have the keys." He said, "Well, I don't have the keys." We checked our pockets. Neither of us had the keys. And every step we got closer to the car was praying, "Please, Jesus, don't let these keys be in this car." Lo and behold, dangling in the ignition were the keys. Well, there were two people who had keys to that car, Ford Motor Company, and they were closed, and my daddy. So I had to call, and I said, "Dad, we're stuck down." I said, "We're stuck. I left the keys in the car. Can you come get us?" He said, "Yeah, where are you?" Long, pregnant pause, and then he said, "You're downtown, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." And so he said, "I'm on my way." He came down in his green and white Ford truck, and I'll never forget, he didn't turn off the ignition. He got out, left the car door open, came, opened the door, got back in the truck, and drove away without saying one word. I said, Wes, you are spending the night at home with me tonight. And he did. And I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It never did. He died 5 years ago. And to that day, he never said one word about that incident, which taught me an important parenting principle, not adding grief to guilt. Because sometimes when we do what's wrong, and he knew that, and I never forgot it. It was funny then, now, but it wasn't funny then. Yeah.
I got one.
Yes, sir.
We have been a family that has enjoyed vacation, just getting away and doing something different. In fact, we just returned yesterday from a family vacation. All my kids and 2 daughter-in-laws, 4 grandkids. My son is here today, who's a great dad himself. But when Tommy was little and the kids were little, we were broke as the Ten Commandments. We didn't have no kind of money. But we did have a car, and we did have enough money to go somewhere. And so we would take off. We went to, I think we were going to Colorado at this time, but I'm not sure exactly where we were headed. We stopped in some, like Kansas or something. And we looked for the cheapest hotel, and we could always find the cheapest hotel. It was part of our spiritual gift mix, the cheapest hotel. We could find it. We found it. It was one of those. It wasn't a Motel 6. It must have been
About a Motel
2 or 3. Motel 3. So we pull up in there, and we're starving, and we see that there's a Holiday Inn just right across the parking lot, and it's kids eat free. So we walk our cheap selves over there to the Holiday Inn, walked in there like we were,
somebody,
Holiday Inn people. And we go to the little restaurant there, and it's kids eat free, and it's also all you can eat spaghetti night. Man, I can't miss all you can eat spaghetti night. So all 3 of the kids and myself eat all you can eat spaghetti. And Patty doesn't get something else. She gets some chicken dish or something. And we go back to our little room. It was a motel, so it was one, you pull your car up and the door's right there, and so your door goes right outside. We get in, and Tommy and Avery, my 2 boys, are in one bed. Patty and I are in the other bed. And Lindsay, we put Lindsay in a drawer there.
She about 15?
No, she was 2.
Oh, okay.
You can get arrested for putting them in a drawer at 15.
I'm thinking.
So we put a pillow in there, we put her in there, and we went to sleep. About 30 minutes, I fall straight asleep. About 30 minutes later, Patty says, no, this is not going to work. She wakes me up. She says, you reek of garlic. You reek of garlic. I can't sleep. I said, okay. So I get up, pick little Avery up. He's about 5 or something, and I put him in the bed with Patty, and I crawl in bed with Tommy. And about 20 minutes later, she goes, this is not working. He reeks. Little 5-year-old. And so we're all 3, me and Tommy and Avery are in this little double bed, and she's got a bed to herself. 30 minutes later, I hear this weeping, just crying. And I look over, and she's not even in the bed. I sit up, and she is on the floor by the door, with the door open, with her head out the door, trying to breathe some clean air. I have no spiritual purpose for this story. You had something. Mine's just a story.
I got a similar one.
Okay.
I'll never forget when I was a young pastor. I was like you. We didn't have any money at all, and somebody told me about this community church up in Michigan that was on an island. It's called Beaver Island. I didn't know anything about Michigan, but this little island, and they would allow a pastor every week to come and stay on the island in the church manse in return for his preaching on Sunday. And so it was a free trip, right? Except that it's 9 million miles to Michigan. And so we said, hey, that's a deal, let's do that. So we take off up there. Now remember, there were no cell phones or technology. The latest technology was that little TV with a built-in VCR that you could get for $100 at Walmart. Remember that one? And if you're lucky, you could figure out how to wire it into your car. And so that's what we had in every VCR tape we could find. And we took off up there. Kids must have been, I don't know, the boy's probably second, third grade, and Emily might have been in the fourth or something like that. And we get up there and spend a fortune taking our car over to this island because I'm not going to be without a car. I get over there and find out there's not but one road on this island, and it's a gravel road. And you can take a bike anywhere on that island you want to because there's nothing to do. And there's one little store that rented videotapes. And no TV in the manse, no nothing. And so, and it was a grim little cottage too. Kids complained about everything. It was too cold, it was too hot, the beds were lousy. I mean, it's the worst vacation we've ever been on. Can't believe you dragged us up here. Well, we're there. I got to stay and preach for the weekend. So we toughed it out, sitting there in that little manse all week, you know, trying to make the best of a bad situation. Finished, preached, left the island and drove all the way out to West Texas to my grandmother's house. Mama Strick, you remember her.
Oh, yeah.
And so by the time we got home, it'd been 2 or 3 weeks, we were sick of each other. And I just chalked that one up. I said to Lee, I said, never again, Lee. We'll never do anything like that. And she said, you're right. Terrible situation. So fast forward about 10, 12 years. They're about 18 and 20 or 16 and 18, something like that. And we were planning a vacation. I said, well, tell me this. We've been on some fun vacations. What's the best vacation we've ever been on? All three of them looked up and said, Beaver Island. I said, do not tell me that. You screamed and yelled and whined about that trip the whole way. And they started laughing. They said, I don't care. It's the one we remember, we love the most. Wow.
You know what you should have done? Took them back.
I wasn't going back to stay in that man's. By then, I'd become a preacher. You know, I mean, I could preach. Somebody's they're going to have to give me more than that. That has no point either, but it was funny at the time.
It is fair enough. You want to hear mine?
Yeah.
It has no point either.
Okay.
My firstborn was a little girl. For the first 2 years were dancing and tea parties and playing Pretty Princess. And then I had a son. And it was a lot of running and wrestling and things crashing in the next room. And the only time he'd sit still was to watch America's Funniest Home Videos. We're sitting in the den watching America's Funniest Home Videos, and he's standing in front of me, freshly potty trained, and he's doing I've got to go to the bathroom dance. Go to the bathroom, go. And it's not a commercial. He's watching the show. And I enjoy the show, so I get lost in it, and I look over, and my son is relieving himself into my shoe on the floor in front of him. I mean, with great accuracy, relieving himself. And my first reaction was and I thought, you don't want to startle someone in that. So I waited and just amazed at the accuracy and there was the only cleanup was to throw the shoe away. And I can't tie that to a Bible story.
What did he do when he got through?
He pulled his big boy pants up and sat down on the couch and watched Funny Home Videos. He didn't even turn around and look at me. He didn't say, I'm sorry. All right, anyway.
Will he be at the 11:15?
He will be.
Be sure and tell us.
Yeah, I'm going to have him stand up. We're going to shift gears dramatically here. Can you talk about an area as a father where you feel you failed, where you didn't get it right?
Let me tackle that one. One of the worst possibilities in this sort of a round table is for you to walk out of here comparing your family to our families. We live in a social media age when everybody posts the funny things that are happening in their family and, the cute pictures and great joys and all that, and you never hear what really is happening in that family. The last thing the three of us want to do is leave you with the impression that we've got something special you don't have. It's not true. So if you got us up on a pedestal, please knock us off and let us share the real life that we lead as fathers and pastors. So all three of my kids have been prodigal kids. All three of them have left home at a certain point and been away for a while and come back. I have a son who has told me 3 times that I wasn't around enough. He told me that when he was 12. He told me that again when he was 17, and again when he was about 22. And all 3 of those times, the other 2 said, we don't get that. But his perception is his reality. I wasn't around enough for him. And I live, and he lives with that history today. I have another son that left, moved out 2 weeks before graduation from high school. And the school he went to would have expelled him if they found out. Refused to come home, and so he didn't even think I knew where he was staying. Well, I found him and tried to get him to come home. He wouldn't do it, so the next day I sold his car out from under him. Any money he had, I took away. Any opportunity to stay independent, I took away from him. He had no choice but to come home. And Lee and I had sat down to write a letter to him, a loving letter that says, we're so proud you're back home again, and we just have a couple of rules that you're going to need to follow while you're here. And we gave him the letter when he came in, welcomed him with open arms, and said, hey, we're going to head off to the movies. And we came back from the movies, and that letter we had written to him was torn up into little pieces and nailed to the mantle of the fireplace. And Lee looks at me and says, well, I guess he's not going to answer us. And I started laughing. I said, what do you mean? He's screaming at us right now. And, you know, the reality is in all 3 of those situations, there were critical opportunities for me to do the best job that I could do, and I did the best I could do. It wasn't enough. And I'll go ahead and add this now. I can't figure out how to segue back into it. But you know what gave me the greatest hope in those years, those dark nights when I couldn't sleep because I didn't know where one of them was, and he hadn't called in 6 months. I didn't know if he was dead or alive. I didn't know where he was. Infant baptism. You're thinking, well, what does that have to do with anything? When we stand there, and we will at the next service, and baptize children, when I stood there as a father and baptized my 3 children, Lee and I made a promise to God. And our promise is that we were going to do all we could to raise these children as children of God within the family of Christ. And at the same time, we claimed God's promise to us. He said he would never leave us. He would never forsake us. That'd be true of our children as well. It was a covenant promise to us and our children from generation to generation. And we said, God, we're pledging we'll do the best we can, and we're also pledging that we believe, we're surrendering that you'll do the same because we believe you will. And years later, when I was as worried as I've ever been, and I've run totally out of answers, I don't know where to turn or who to turn to. In the middle of the night, I'd say to God, he's your child. I'm just a steward. And I don't know what to do right now, but it's a pledge I made to you, and I accepted, I surrendered to the promise you gave me. And that, people want to know why baptism's important. For me, that was the only thing that gave me comfort when I didn't know where else to turn. And it meant the world to me. It was a great faith experience for me.
Rufus, what about you? Area where you think you feel you failed as a father?
Well, my kids will be able to say this because I've said this to them. I overprotected my kids and tried to protect them, and did to a large degree, from some of the suffering that I went through. And so I didn't want them to have to go through the crucible of suffering that I went through. And I just want them to pursue their passion and their dreams so they could be the best that they could be. But in the midst of that, I didn't allow them to really suffer or go through difficult times so that their character could be rebuilt. So if I had to go back and do it all over again, I would be less protective. I would still protect, but I'd be far less protective so they would not be overprotected. Now, we've talked and working through that, but I would not overprotect as much?
You know, my area of failure, and there's 100 of them, but the one that comes to mind most often for me doesn't sound like a parenting failure, but it may be the most important parenting discipline we have or need to have. I needed to love my wife better. I think when I was at my best with my kids, I consider myself a pretty good dad. I probably was pretty bad as a husband. And I think I speak to you moms as well. I think we need to understand that when we stand up and make a vow before God with our spouse, that's a very important thing. And that it also communicates incredible things to our children. We were so out of our minds busy over here. 70, 80 hour weeks. And one of the early years I was in school full time at seminary trying to finish up my MDiv, running, doing all kind of things. I don't know where I had time to do anything. And I know that I gave any extra time to my kids. I think Patty was the one that missed out on my attention. And I think that's a huge mistake that we make, fathers and mothers, that we just get so focused on our kids, which is so important. Well, how do you say that's a bad thing? But we get so focused on them that we forget about the one that we've made these vows to. Now, Patty and I have corrected that. But I think that is a failure. And like I said, it doesn't sound like a parenting failure, but I think that it is. And I think we have to be careful about it.
What's a faith fact that you could share with the rest of the folks here that you've learned as a father? Craig talked about the importance of infant baptism during those times. What about you two?
Let me jump in one more time if I can, because I think this is important. When we started building a transition for my moving out of the role of senior pastor and Rufus moving into that role, it was a lengthy process on purpose. We worked at it for close to 5 years, didn't we, Rufus? And in the last couple of years, Rufus was ready, and he said, what are you going to do with your time when you take this role of founding pastor? And I said, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. And he said, well, I'm not taking the role of senior pastor until you figured that out. And it took us about a year. We talked through that many times on retreats, the three of us, and it would always come back to, what are you going to do? And I mulled that over for a year. And as I thought about my life and what I wanted to be remembered for, it dawned on me that although I've worked, we all do, but I've worked obsessively to grow this church. I've given everything I have to growing this church. And I thought about that and thought, and God's blessed it. It's a great church in every way. I love you all. But I don't want to be remembered as a great pastor. I want to be remembered as a great father. And I knew I had failed at that. And here my kids grown. And there's a passage that talks about restoring the years the locusts ate in the Old Testament, which means going back and correcting some of that. And so I went to my boys who were grown. I mean, they were in their 30s, and said, look, I don't know if you've got time for me in your life, but I made some mistakes. I need to correct them if I can. And I'll take whatever I can get, lunch once a month or breakfast, whatever. Or we can do something together, and I'll fully engage with whatever you want to do. And they were so gracious, they came back and said, no, we want to do something just with you. And we started the Banyan Foundation out of that commitment. And it's been an incredible experience as a nonprofit that the three of us are involved in, and they take the lead. They've taught me so much about what they know how to do, and it has begun the process of restoring the years the locusts ate. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said that was true with all my kids. I do better at points with each of them. It's a daily struggle, but it doesn't matter whether you're 20 and have your first child or whether you're 80 and have great-grandchildren. You are a father until you die. And the idea of your kids graduating, getting married, and you're out, doesn't work in our society. They will be coming to you for counsel and advice and modeling and all, until you die. And for me, that was a really important step to take to restore some of that. And I'm not living with any guilt about it. It's not a guilt thing. It's just recognizing what I did that I didn't do as well as I should have. Now I need to recover that.
I got invited to speak at a church in Michigan. And something about Michigan, huh? And it was one of those times where, we speak a lot and you don't want to go, you're tired, but you made a commitment. And so I went, spoke Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday night, as things were wrapping up, all the men gathered and were debriefing and so forth. And people were going around the room saying about various things. And then there was one 82-year-old man. I told this to the Encore group. I'll never forget it. My kids were about 11, 13, and 15 at the time. And an 82-year-old man said, "Can I say something?" I said, "Certainly." He said, "This is what I've learned, and I want to pass on to young fathers." He said, "When you're young and your kids are young, you need to be a spring of water gushing forth with information, instruction to your kids. But when they get older, teenagers and young adults, you need to stop and become a well where they can come and drink." When he said that, I broke down. I started crying because it was an answer to prayer as I was struggling with my teenage kids. It was as if God himself said that to me. And when I gained my composure, I said to those men, I said, "I have a confession to make. I did not want to be here. I was tired and fatigued, and I don't know if I blessed you, but God sent me to this church, to you this weekend, so I could hear that man say what he said to me. That's why I came here. And when your kids are young, be a spring of water, giving and gushing forth information. But when they get older, you be a well and let them come and drink." And it changed my paradigm of pastoring, fathering my kids, as I just eased off a little bit and just waited for them to come. Made all the difference in the world.
There's a passage in Scripture that says, the joy of the Lord is my strength. One of the things that I've tried to do is to bring joy to our home. And I think that dads, we have this opportunity to be pace setters. Moms do too. But guys, sometimes we abdicate that. And we have an opportunity to be pace setters in our home. And I would love us to set the pace with joy. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable and we don't discipline and so on and so forth. But I think we can do all that within the context of joy and peace. Joy and peace. And I fear sometimes, especially we as dads are the ones that stifle joy and peace. And we need to rethink that. I've always thought that when my wife drives into the driveway or my kids drive in the driveway, that they are excited about being there. That they want to drive into that driveway, not dread it. Because you know what happens when they dread it? They don't drive in the driveway.
Yeah.
They find another place to go. And I just think that we have got this incredible opportunity, dads, to be people of joy and peace. And listen, I know some of you are sitting out here saying, I can't do that. And maybe you can't do it because you yourself don't have joy or peace, which is another sermon altogether. But think about that. Do you have joy? Do you have peace? Or maybe, I know that some of us are just not wired that way. We're just not the bring the joy quotient to the home. But there are some things that we can do to encourage that. And I'll say, as Craig has said so beautifully, it's never too late to change that paradigm.
Amen.
You may have been a grouchy old dad, but you can change some of that.
Yeah.
You can really change some of that, and it changes the whole complexion of your family, for your kids, for your grandkids, and so on, I think.
Changes everything.
To close, I want you to share one of those moments as a father where you feel like you were most successful, where you got it right as a dad. Just one.
Yeah, I can take that one. Actually, I'll pass.
Just one.
Yeah.
Just one.
I got nothing. You got anything?
I got nothing.
Dad, are we there yet? No, we're all in process. We have not arrived. We are arriving. And let me close with this. Jesus taught us how to pray. His first line in that prayer to his disciples was, can you say that again? Cling to that. Because all of us, no matter what kind of dysfunction there's been in our families, can rely on the fact that we have a heavenly Father who is in heaven, so that we lift up our perspective when we are talking to him. And he is the only one who can make up the difference, give us grace to override our failures. And we have to teach our children that as well. Transfer some of the pressure we put on ourselves for our children, to let them know when we fail, we have a divine parent. Whether you're a mother raising kids alone, whether you're a father, we have a divine parent, our Father who art in heaven. In fact, we pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.